Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to chair this session. As Katrin said, I'm very much on the non-academic spectrum, and I've stumbled into the value of languages rather late in life. I run a PR company based in Shoreditch called Media, and we specialise in architecture, property and the built environment. And even though we're 30 people in Shoreditch, we work right across the world. And over the years, I started to hire people who had language skills. And in that time, I've really come to understand that the language skills go much, much further than being able to translate somebody else's press release. It has had a profound impact on our business, our growth, our ability to build relationships with clients right across the world, to engage with people. So most of I'll just show you some of the projects we work on, because nobody really understands what the built environment often means in this context. So this is British Airways I360, which was launched in Brighton. I had international attention from architecture and design correspondents, and again our team, who I'll show you later on, speak a number of different languages, were able to deal with that absolutely seamlessly and go beyond the prosaic, really understand what they're about. This is Amanda Levitt's new museum in Lisbon. Again, the launch of that in October had people from all over the world, of every language, every culture. We've worked for 3 years for a trade group called Turkish Ceramics, who are selling essentially ceramic products, tiles, toilets, facade systems, into the UK and across Europe. And we have a Turkish speaker who's not only enabled us to manage that account, but also find many, many new business opportunities. And I think what was really interesting, when we pitched for this business, we were very proud of the fact we had a Turkish speaker, and the people from Turkish Ceramics said that wasn't necessary. And I have to tell you, I don't know how we would have coped if she wasn't there. It's been entirely necessary. This is Singapore Gardens by the Bay by Wilkinson Eyre, again, was launched about 5 years ago. The Venice Biennale, which is the architecture biennale, attracts people from all over the world, and we have people down there who can speak every single language, deal with cultural ambassadors, journalists, all right across the piece. Salone de Meuble, which is the major design trade show really in Milan each year, again multilingual. And this is our next international project coming out of London, which is the extension of the V&A Museum by Amanda Levitt. So our team, and this is always actually, this is a quiz question at our Christmas party. You've got to remember how many languages we speak, but that's a good indication. I don't think that's too bad for an organisation headed by somebody who can speak no languages whatsoever, and only 30 people. So we're very proud of that. But today's session, we've got Professor Julie Curtis from Oxford, Dr. Pegram Harrison from Oxford, and Chris from GCHQ. So what we're going to do is they're going to speak for about 5 minutes each, and then we're going to open the floor to as many questions as possible. So we want to make this as engaging a session as possible. So over to you, Julie. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm actually a professor of Russian, but I spent a lot of time over the last 10, 20 years with what we call schools liaison outreach, and that's involved, to some extent, considering what careers people do, and I've done various surveys. So although what I'm going to say arises from my specific investigation into Russian, it does actually apply to languages across our faculty, which are European languages, but it would equally be true of Oriental languages and indeed to some extent of classical languages. Can I just, before we start, ask you in the audience perhaps to identify yourselves a little bit? Would you be so kind as to put up your hand if you are somebody who either teaches or advises young people about their choices in terms of A-level courses or a university study? Could you kindly put up your hand? Thank you very much. And could I also ask you to put up your hand if you're somebody who employs people who need languages? Great. Okay, thank you very much. That's very helpful. Let me just start with 2 anecdotes. The first one is why actually translation does matter. Being accurate is extremely important. One of the many, many grotesque boasts that Donald Trump has inflicted upon the world in the last few months is one which has fed quite importantly into the sense that he is somebody who is being supported by Russia, which is a very, very significant issue in world politics today. And one of his many boasts was that Putin had described him as brilliant. I'm a genius. He said, I'm a genius. I'm happy with that. I can talk to someone on this level. People who actually looked at what Putin had said pointed out that this was a mistranslation, that this is a complete misunderstanding. He had used the word yarki in Russian, which does not mean brilliant, clever. It means bright in the sense of colourful. It's an ironic term. And yet, because Trump then colported it worldwide, it has actually had a significant effect on a huge number of people's perceptions. Another anecdote. This is from somebody who, this is from the employment end of things, somebody who came back to speak to us from Deutsche Bank a few years ago and described how he went through recruiting processes. He was somebody who was responsible for recruiting for this large international bank. And he said, the very first thing I do when I receive all these glittering CVs from people, all of whom have got, without exception, excellent MBAs from the world over, is I put them into 2 piles. If you have at least 1 language, you're still in contention. If you don't have a language, you're on the bin. I am not even going to begin to consider you for further interview. Okay, I'm just going to say a couple of things about issues to do with encouraging people to think about studying languages and where that might take them and why that should be so. One of the things that we try to talk about when we're recruiting people for studying modern languages at university is we ask them to think about about why this is such a good use of 4 years of undergraduate study. And the very simple fact is that if you're going to learn a language well, it takes time. There are no high-speed ways of picking up a language in no time at all. You need time. So 4 whole years of university study is a unique opportunity in your life to get 1 or 2 languages up to a level of genuine skill, not smattering, but being able to write, to listen, to understand what you hear, to understand what you read, and to translate back or forth, to write emails, to draft documents. By the time you've finished high-level university study in 1 or 2 languages, you will really be able to use the language appropriately. It doesn't mean that you're going to speak it perfectly, and most modern linguists in the world do not speak their language, the other languages perfectly, but you can function in that language and you can make a difference. So we also encourage people to think about the fact that if they've studied 1 language at school, they're very likely, and there does seem to be some scientific evidence and be great to get some proper support for this theory, that if you know 1 language, if you speak Urdu at home, if you speak Lithuanian, if you studied French, then you're already, as it were, switched on neurologically to learning more languages. So university is also an opportunity to start a language from scratch. You may not have had the opportunity to do Russian or Chinese or Arabic or Portuguese, and you wouldn't have thought about it until you think about applying to university. But suddenly, here's an opportunity which is not going to come your way again in your entire life. You'd never thought of doing Portuguese. Well, it might be worth pausing for a moment or two to consider that this is going to enable you to spend a large amount of time in South America as well as in Portugal, and that you are going to be the person who is going to get all the opportunities if you're employed in a job where somebody needs to negotiate with Brazil or travel there or do a conference call. Another reason why studying modern languages at university is exciting is because, of course, all modern languages courses include a year abroad. And so students who study modern languages go and spend an entire year, which is in fact 15 months of their life, around the age of 20, 21, and they are going to live in the foreign country. They may work, they may teach, they may study. People who've doing Russian. One of my students of Russian and philosophy went and spent his year abroad studying percussion at the Conservatoire in St. Petersburg. I've had people selling smoked salmon on the Trans-Siberian Railway. They've taught in Moscow. They've worked for KPMG. They have made films. They have studied at theatre school. They have worked with disabled children in charities in Pskov. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of opportunities which young people can take at the age of 20, 21. They leave home, they leave their country, they have to function in a foreign language, they have to cope with the problems, they have to deal with the whole business of setting up somewhere to live, they have to deal with the bureaucracy, and they cope and they come back, and they all come back as, it's fascinating for us and a huge privilege to teach them, because people who we said goodbye to at the age of 20 come back at 21 and a half, and they have lived a huge amount of life since we last saw them, and we meet these people who've just had the most extraordinary set of experiences. And when they go out towards the employment world, they are able to bring all sorts of skills, experience, depth of knowledge, confidence, personal qualities as well as knowledge to whatever they choose. And what we always say about modern languages is that actually, I always used to say this, that the world is your oyster. You can go in any direction, because the great thing is if you have 1 or 2 languages up to university level, then you can add a professional qualification or a vocational training or an internship within an enterprise, and you will come onto the job market maybe a couple of years later with 1 or 2 languages plus your professional skill, and then you really start picking out the plums of the jobs that are available. Some people use their language learning of 1 or 2 languages to make a stepping stone to further languages. So you study Russian and you do 1 term of Croatian while you're here. Next thing you know, you do a postgraduate study at Harvard and pick up Ukrainian and Slovak, and 2 years later you're in a top law firm dealing with all the lawsuits which involve Eastern Europe and Russia. So we have this fantastically successful story of employment, exciting adventures that people have. They go out into the world as very impressive individuals. And I always used to say, you can do any job in the world, maybe not doctor or vet, but otherwise do modern languages. There is nothing that you can't do after that, until, of course, my most recent survey of graduates, where somebody said, do you know, I did Russian and, no, I didn't do French, they didn't do Russian, they did French and something else, French and Italian, I think. No, they did do Russian. Because she wrote in to say, but after a few years, I decided I wanted a new direction. So I'm now a senior lecturer in emergency clinical care, veterinary care, but I do go and lecture in Russia and Eastern Europe. So she's even become a vet. Thank you very much.
So, good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Pegram Harrison, and I'm a lecturer in the business school, the Said Business School here, particularly in entrepreneurship. And I'm reminded at this point of the remark of George W. Bush. Does anyone remember this? So the trouble with the French, you see, is that they don't even have a word for entrepreneur. So how complacent we were. We thought it couldn't get worse. I have had a very happy life as a lecturer in a business school, far beyond my expectation when I was trained as an historian, because mainly I spend my time among incredibly creative people. They're creative, and I will say this, every single one of them in every single business school I've ever taught in, here and in London Business School and another school in London, every single one of them is multilingual. You don't get in without at least one other language, and generally you don't get out without yet another. Even in a one-year program, there is usually a requirement or an expectation or a simple peer pressure. Now, that's not just because MBAs are instrumental, not just because they're trying to get a better job. It's a deeper thing. And Katrin, when she asked me to do this and to join my colleagues on this panel, asked us to get beyond this idea of languages are useful, beyond the instrumental mindset, because that really isn't the mindset of many of the future business leaders or even just business people that I'm privileged to work with. I want to just talk about how they get beyond conceiving of multilingualism as merely useful in 3 ways. So the first is language is a sellable product. Yes, it helps to sell a person, but it's in and of itself, it's a sellable product. And I won't go so far as to say it's a commodity. I think the global market for language learning technologies is big, something like 5 billion. That's nothing, though, compared to, I don't know, film or obviously any financial product. But it's projected to grow at an astonishing rate over the next 20 years. From the surveys that I looked at, something along the lines of 20% growth in this market. So there's a business opportunity right there. I mean, as a measure of this isn't new. I was delighted to listen to Matthew Reynolds discussing Pope's translation of Homer, and I remember someone teaching me when I was much younger the comment of someone like Samuel Johnson or Richard Bentley that it's a very pretty poem, Mr. Pope, but it isn't Homer. And that didn't bother Pope at all, did it? It was marketing. He made a bundle out of his translation. I don't know what the amount is in today's money, but I think it was something on the order of 300 guineas, and that's a lot.
And he was wrong, it is Homer. It's just as much Homer as anything Bentley would.
Well, yes, I mean, yeah, and
that's quite right. It was huge. He made a lot of money.
he made a lot of money at it. It was the discussion of Homer and Pope made money for Pope, and he kind of knew what he was doing. The main point is that translation changes what is possible in English. I think in many ways that's what Professor Reynolds was getting at, and it changes what is possible in a market. It's creative in that respect, not just useful. Now, there are other ways of thinking about the marketability of language. My husband, for a long time, was a translator from French into English, but he really never made enough money to live on. And mainly that was because the market for French, because there's so many people who speak it, is not very aggressive. You can't charge as much to translate from French. Now, if he had spoken Greek, he'd have been able to charge higher rates, and he might have made a career out of it for longer. That's a sad way to look at the market for multilingualism, but a not unimportant one. In a globalizing world, the significance of language capability is, from a career point of view, is being able to manage the complex supply chains that bring products to us wherever we might be. As these supply chains complexify, so too do they cut across cultures, cut across languages. And most people who are tasked with managing that are forced to work collaboratively, because no one can manage all of the languages in the supply chain of, say, this pencil. There's a famous economic essay by an economist named, I think, Lionel Ross, about the origin of a pencil and the observation that no one on earth knows how to make, no one person on earth knows how to make a pencil. And so it is also true that no one person on earth knows how to manage the supply chain that brings this pencil to all of us in the room. Thank you to the conference organizers for giving us each a Creative Multilingualism pencil. But think about where it comes from and how many languages went past it to get it here. No one person can handle that. That means that the real work dimension of language is not so much being able to speak it or being able to use a language, but rather being able to work with others who speak other languages. And that collaborative activity is where further creativity enters into the system. Being able to manage just the simple communications is a team-based effort that is hard work. Generally speaking, where people succeed in entrepreneurial ventures or succeed in complex managerial roles is not because they have technical skills, accounting, using spreadsheets, but where they have human skills, where they have communication skills, where they can coordinate people. This is what is privileged in hiring, and it is a clear sign of skill in that area, as Professor Curtis points out, if an individual speaks more than one language. That's an indicator of communication ability, of coordination ability, and that's really the skill that's being sought in recruiting. Beyond that is the third dimension, other than the sellable product and the sort of entrepreneurial skills or coordination skills lens that I'd like to look at language through. The third thing is this notion of leadership. What we know about leadership from management studies research is that it is mainly about influencing other people. It is therefore mainly about communicating. And as communication challenges become complexified through the diversity of teams, so too does the leadership challenge, where an ability to do that has to cross linguistic barriers. Leadership effectiveness will decline unless there is a respect for the linguistic diversity in the leadership challenge. Now, that's not to say that leaders need to be multilingual in the strictest sense, but it most certainly is to say that leaders are most effective if they understand the potential of multilingual teams, the potential to create value through their interaction. And leaders that encourage and develop that are doing as much for creative value creation through the interplay of languages as anyone else. So on that note, let me just end with a sense that I feel, and I think any business school professor would agree, that multilingualism enables a better working life, yes. Monolingualism disables it. And we're the biggest champions in the working world of creative multilingualism. Thank you.
So I think this is working. So we'll open the floor to some questions, but I'm going to kick one question off for the panel. I mean, obviously, in my experience in terms of who we're hiring and coming through, there is an absolutely clear differentiation between international or European candidates who, as I think you were talking about, I do exactly the same thing. I go to the last page. And it's interesting where people put languages on their resume. It's always on the last page, and it's after their proficiency in Excel or PowerPoint. But I always go to that last page and see what languages are spoken. But it's absolutely clear that anyone who is either Australian or British are less likely to have a language. Or when you quiz them, it's a little bit, it's no more than sort of tourist level. I mean, we've all talked about these amazing opportunities with languages. Why is that not filtering down into our communities so that our children, I mean, we have a 15-year-old at the moment learning German, and I have to say it's pretty tough going because he doesn't, trying to get him to understand all of these wonderful opportunities that are out there is not replicated in his peer group, I don't think, or with his, really, the broader teaching community. So how do we solve that?
Well, it's a hard argument to make to a 7-year-old that you're going to get a better job if you learn French. So I think there's in multilingual cultures, like say Luxembourg, no one has to convince the 7-year-olds to learn 4 languages. They already know them, and we can't in the complacent Anglophone world, to use the phrase that Janice Carruthers used earlier this morning. We can't replicate that, and it's not surprising to me that people who are ambitious figure it out for themselves, but that's not really enough to achieve the sort of social benefits of that are visible in a multilingual culture. I don't know. It's a long-winded way of saying I just don't know. I see a hand in the audience, though. would we like to?
Yes, absolutely. There's a lady up the back here.
Thank you. I'm a French and Arabic and Spanish speaker. I also teach middle secondary school, and I found your question is very interesting because in my teaching career, I always have the children asking me why we're learning French, why we're learning Spanish. And just to add more to your colleague question, the way to convince them, from my own experience, is not always for example, 7 to 14 years old that, oh, you'll have a better opportunity to find a job now. I try to convince them it's a natural way of life. Language is a making thing. It's facilitating the learning for them. Make the love for the foreign languages. At that stage in their life, they don't really understand as much as, oh, well, I'll have a better career, I'll have a friend living in France or Spain or anywhere around the world. But it's actually living the learning experience and enjoying it and making them happy. And later on in life, I believe a lot of them actually carry it on to GCSE level and then to A level and then to take it further to university level. And just wanted to answer your question of how to convince a 7 years old or up to 14 years old.
Yes, okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
And there's a lady over here. So, and
my name is Karen Park, and I'm part of the ARI research group.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm speaking from my own experience, but I did my term abroad in my late teens, 20. And at the end of it, I had my kid brother come to visit, and he was probably all of 12 years old. And it was the immersion. He came to France, and it was that moment when he experienced language in its real context that it clicked for him. And there's something about that immersion experience. And I've seen it now with my little nephews. America has started to be more accepting of bilingual and immersion schools. And so I have little nephews, one in kindergarten, one now in 2nd grade, who are benefiting from that immersion environment. All their education is taught in Spanish up till probably 3rd grade. And they just work in the language. They enjoy it, there's no question. And the final bit of that is I suffered from an education system that was anti-bilingualism. And they waited until after the critical period. And so we observe in children, there is a period when when your ability to grasp grammar is more open. And when I was young, we weren't given an opportunity to study another language until we were just past that, until we were 14 or 15 in schools. And so the younger that you can bring children into language education, I found, the better, because there's more of that cognitive openness to it too, possibly.
absolutely. I love the idea of sending all children to France at the moment, but the timing is a bit out now, isn't it? The lady over here.
Thank you. My name is Eva, and I'm originally from Croatia. I've been living in London for 10 years, and I'm also a French and Spanish teacher and a master's student in multilingualism. I just wanted to ask if what is the future of advising secondary school students in terms of their career prospects? Because from my experience, less and less students are taking up foreign languages for A levels, and they don't understand the purpose of where can it take them. They either do it to get a high mark if they're very good at it, although the level is very often quite basic. Or if, for example, their grandparents have a holiday home in Spain, but how can we make it more career orientated? Is there an advisory board or where people from different industries can actually go into schools at secondary level? Because this is where they become more aware of what they can do with it, and different industries they can work in to increase the uptake of foreign language languages at A level as well as university level.
Absolutely. I mean, I think from a business point of view, I think there are a few businesses who talk overtly about the value of this, and also the point that it should be fun. It's not always a chore, that this can be something that, to the lady at the back, it's part of your life. It's, the people who work for me, it's second nature, and they're always learning new languages. It's part of how they operate. I don't think we have that in our communities. But to the other lady who spoke, I think I've seen some very positive moves, certainly in schools in Hackney, where they're bringing in languages at early years. And I think that's a very positive move. There's a lady in the lovely green jacket here who was waiting for a question.
My question is, I'm French. I read German at the Sorbonne, and I also taught at Stanford University literature and French language. And I discovered that over there, it's a good university, and I had students who were very interested in learning languages for different, somewhere in politics, but part of the staff at this department, which is highly rated, in the States, was dedicated by full professor about studying how do you teach French as a second language, and in general, how do you acquire a language? And their method was superb. They started from listening, speaking, and then later on reading and writing. Now, I came to this country and I thought, everybody will be bilingual. I couldn't believe the number of very bright people, Oxford educated, telling me, we are not good at languages. The British think that their brain functions differently from the rest of the world. No, it's amazing. And all they mean is they are lazy. And then I was told it's such a difficult subject. Well, in France, when I was doing I'm French, it's the least gifted children who chose languages like me, had German, English, Latin, and Russian, because I was stupid enough I couldn't do math. And so there is this deep down, there is this. Now, my question now, I'm sorry, is I think that the way languages are taught, I know about French in this country, is appalling. I have 5 granddaughters who love France, and they want to be, to learn. And I helped recently one of them who is doing GCSE, and the books that she had to use were incomprehensible to me. In 1 hour, I explained to her rules. And also, I attended as a governor of schools, teaching of French in different classes. And there is a wide range. A good professor, a good teacher at any level can get enthusiastic student. And some are too boring.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
And I think Julie, if you can answer that.
I know that we've got to round up in a minute.
Yeah,
so
sorry.
All right, I'm going to come out with some heartfelt comments on all this. We all need, if we care about modern languages, to make a lot of noise and a lot of fuss about this. Various things. GCSEs were introduced in the mid-80s because we wanted to have touchy-feely exams and everybody would learn languages. That has been a catastrophe. The number of people studying modern languages in Britain has plummeted. So actually, GCSEs have a lousy syllabus, and you can get quite high marks for a qualification and you can speak the language completely inaccurately. No foreigner would understand you, but you can get an A. So GCSEs have to be reformed. Government has to be persuaded, and education authorities, people in charge of education, have to be persuaded to reinstate GCSE as modern language as compulsory. That's coming in with the EBAC. But at the moment, schools don't even rate it beyond the age of 11. It's only compulsory up to the age of 11. Or everybody in Britain needs to study a language. We need to do it because not just people will get jobs, and that is demonstrable, but also because learning a language teaches you that other people think differently from you. They think differently about gender, they think differently about property, they think differently about land, they think differently about politics, they think differently about sex, they think differently about hundreds of things. These things are expressed in song, in film, in music, in theatre, in all sorts of genres. Students need to have opportunities to watch fun cartoons in foreign languages. They need to have the songs which they don't entirely understand. They have to be immersed in all the fun. There are now hardly any school trips because it's now become so surrounded by bureaucracy. People are not being taken abroad. And in the run-up to Brexit, one young woman of 19 I heard reported in the press saying she'd never been abroad because it was all too dangerous. Our failure to keep modern languages going is what's led to Brexit, and we should have done something about it years ago, and we should do something about it very urgently now.
Okay, so do we have to wrap up? Or okay, I'm really sorry. There's quite a few hands, and obviously this is a great subject, and it's ideal that it's the coffee break. So please, let's keep it going. But thank you to the panelists, and thank you to the audience for great questions.